I've mentioned before my favorite isekais and why I like them. So now I'll talk at length about the isekai genre. Starting with the basics, what even is an isekai? It's spelled with the characters for other world, so you can, if you're being reductive, consider any series where the main characters visit worlds that are not their home world as an isekai. That means Star Trek, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Warhammer 40k, they all count, especially Harry Potter. So we might want to tighten the definition by including cannot return to their home world. This would rule out dimension hopping and interstellar travel. So series like Solo Leveling, Welcome to Japan, Elf-san, and The Devil is a Part-Timer aren't true isekai, because the main character can return to their world of origin. This also allows for a distinct line between non-isekai, dimension hopping, and reisekai series. Reisekais are generally about a main character returning to their own world with powers gained from their isekai adventures, and don't go back to the alternate world. Though they may also include one-way trips for fantasy characters from isekais to Earth. And examples of this can include All My Neighbors Are Convinced the Female Knight from My Rice Fields Is My Wife, Lilia's Pregnancy Will End the World, and The Hero Trained by the Worst Demon King. So with the understanding that isekais are generally one-way trips, how does someone get isekai'd? Well, there are two methods. Summoning and reincarnation. Now we have a simple working definition of what qualifies as an isekai series. It's a one-way trip to another world via either being summoned or dying and reincarnating into it. And within the isekai genre, there are two distinct subgenres: the JRPG and the non-RPG. Pretty self-explanatory. The JRPG style isekais use menu screens and stat lists to explain what characters can do. These are most prominent within the isekai genre because it removes the majority of the legwork the author has to do in explaining the world and the characters in it. It comes off as lazy sometimes, but it can work in some instances so long as the author invests enough in world building. The non-RPG isekais are much more uncommon. Well, at least outside of the shoujo reincarnated into an otome game trope. There isn't often RPG mechanics inside of a visual novel. And that otome game setting, especially being reincarnated as a villainess, is incredibly common as a setting for female audience-intended manga. I can't tell you what's so appealing to women about being reincarnated into a story you've read before as the villain and deciding, you know what, I don't think I want to be bad. But outside of that, many of the non-RPG isekai tend to fall off after the first few chapters because of a lack of world building. But once in a while you come across a series that hits all of the right notes. The world building is great, the characters are interesting and entertaining, the plot is engaging, and it doesn't use any RPG tropes to handhold you through explaining the world. These are the series that do it right. And these four are my favorites of those series. Moonlit Journey Across Another World, known by otaku as Tsuki Michi, starts with Makoto Musumi falling to his new life as a rejected hero. In his daily life, Makoto was so average that he's teased by his classmates. Then he gets home and finds his dad's new novel ready for him to read, but the next thing he knows, he's floating in a skybox while Tsukuyomi, the moon god, explains Makoto's parents are originally from a fantasy world, and they have a standing deal with the goddess of that world to offer one of their kids as a hero should she need one. If Makoto doesn't go, one of his sisters will have to, and he's not about to make them do it. So Makoto accepts his fate with a single request that shows Tsukuyomi is a real bro. Makoto is also given a special power by the moon god before he gets pulled into the goddess's realm. But not only is she a vain bitch, she insults Makoto before gifting him with the ability to speak with every non-human race before throwing him out on the edge of the world, quite literally. Tsukuyomi shows up again and does some hurried narrative building before Makoto crashes down completely unharmed, because he is an OPMC. And what follows is his first meeting with the locals, as he kicks the head off of a two-headed dog, saving an orc. Their tribe is called the Highland Orcs, and the one he saved is Emma. She teaches him how to use magic while telling him about a dragon named Shin who's been demanding tribute, so he chooses to try and do something about it. But not only was it not the dragon Shin who was demanding tribute, it was in fact a group of demons using Shin's name for clout, But also Makoto can't quite control his magic yet, so he ends up one-shotting the entire encampment, which wakes Shin up. Makoto fights the dragon and is winning when Shin uses its powers of illusions and barriers to trap him while reading his memories. This provides us with some backstory on Makoto, and when he breaks out of the barrier, Shin has committed to the idea of pandering to him out of entertainment value. Shin proposes a contract where they'd be equals, but the ritual spell shifts from a 5-5 to an 8-2, meaning Makoto is much, much stronger than the supposedly invincible dragon. But Shin accepts the contract, which leads to her taking a human form. This, however, does have an unintended side effect. Shin's misdimension changes from an empty space to something resembling Earth, with flora that Makoto recognizes. A later party with the Highland Orcs, and Shin suggests relocating them to the misdimension now that it's livable, and the Orcs readily agree. Not long later, Makoto and the Orcs are trying to gather building materials when Shin shows up holding a dwarf. Then a giant spider breaks into the dimension, which technically shouldn't be possible. The ensuing fight shows just how unhinged both the spider and Makoto really are, especially when Makoto goes full fuck it we ball mode. While Makoto's down, Shin facilitates a contract with the spider, who also takes a human form, and the dwarf Shin rescued turns out to be from the Elder Dwarf tribe, who also migrate to the Mist Dimension along with 2 other races. Meanwhile, Makoto gives his 2 servants their new names, Shin becoming Tomoe and the spider becoming Mio. From there, the story unfolds as a fantasy adventure through the goddess shitty world where a war between humanoid races and demons causes Makoto problems, since he doesn't want to get involved in that bullshit. While he's also engaging in trade as a merchant and developing the Mist Dimension as more and more races move in. Beginning as a web novel authored by Kei Azumi before publishing as a light novel in 2013, then a manga in 2015 drawn by Kotora Kino, then a 12-episode anime crafted by C2C airing summer 2021, with a 25-episode season 2 by JC Staff airing winter 2024, with a 3rd season currently in production. This is a very unique take to the Isekai genre, a non-RPG power fantasy with logic to it. Motoko isn't strong for no reason. He was frail and sickly on Earth, trained to get to normal, and now that he's no longer under the same burden of Earth, he's so crazy powerful that he can actually pose a threat to the goddess personally. And as he continues to get stronger, it's explained in a way that makes sense with the world and events. It's a very well-crafted world with rules that apply to everyone. So with 3 versions of the story, I think the manga is the superior product of the 3. The anime follows the novel more closely because that's just how the story's designed. But the anime drops many of the jokes and gags, while the novel can get a bit convoluted with how it's written. The manga fixes both issues, with the flow and speed of the narrative and the gags being showcased when they're important but still getting told when they're background fluff. And that's why I recommend the manga over the other 2. Its comedy is so on point that the characters will comment on the absurdity of each other. Like when the forest ogres, who are just brown elves, become obsessed with bananas. When they finally figure out cultivating banana trees, they name the first one the young master's little banana. Makoto is not happy about this. There's also one of the more recent chapters where Root, one of the great dragons of the setting, similar to Shin, shows up after a literal sex change, because he can just do that. And the reason he did it was because he really, really wants to fuck Makoto. The exchanges between Root and Makoto are just pure comedy, and that is the primary reason for even picking up this series in the first place. It's funny, it's entertaining, and I really recommend the manga for the best possible product, the most entertaining version of the story. The Wrong Way to Use Healing Magic is about a pair of high schoolers summoned to a fantasy world to fight a demon lord and save the world. But our main character is not one of them. His name is Usato Ken, and he was pulled along by accident with their summoning. The 2 who were summoned as heroes being the Student Council President Inukami Suzune and the Vice President Ryusen Kazuki. The first weird thing is that Suzune knows all about the isekai tropes and seems to be excited for this turn of events. She's supposed to be from a prim and proper wealthy girl family, but she seems to have knowledge of otaku culture? The second weird thing comes from testing the high schooler's magic. Kazuki can use rare light magic, because of course he can. Suzune can use lightning magic and is just as strong as Kazuki. But when Usato gets his magic evaluated, the crystal grows an emerald green, with the attending mage freaking out and dragging Usato back to the king. Of course, the title gave it away. Usato can use healing magic, which is human exclusive and extremely rare. But there's a problem. Her name is Rose, and she shows up to the king court hearing about the hero summoning. They try to keep Usato's magic quiet, but the other two show up and let Usato's color slip. This initiates a kidnapping as Rose takes Usato to be part of her rescue squad. Apparently, Rose was the former commander of the Knights military. Like the whole military. Then an incident happened that caused her to change career trajectories from battle master to battle medic. And she created the rescue squad comprised of dubious men whose whole purpose is the retrieval of fallen soldiers. With Usato having healing magic, Rose is set to train him like she trained herself. If you've ever maintained a gym routine, then you'll understand the concept. What if you could just heal your muscle fatigue and soreness away and train consistently at the same level for hours or days on end? Well, that's what she does to Usato, which eventually leaves him superhuman in raw muscle power. There's also a bit of Pavlovian conditioning which changes his personality a bit when he gets fired up, byproduct of the training. Eventually comes the heroes and Usato's first war zone against the demons. With the help of a future sight fox girl, Usato manages to avoid the worst case scenario of the heroes, his friends, getting TPK'd by a demon in black armor. And good God does he kick her ass. The story written by Kurokata and starting out as a web novel before getting a light novel publication of 155 chapters in 12 volumes from March 2016 to March 2020. And also getting a sequel series starting in December of 2023. It got a manga being drawn by Reki Kaguyama that's been publishing since 2017, and in 2024 it got its first season of 13 episodes crafted by Shin-A Animation. Usato isn't an OP main character, at least not at first. He's just a normal teenager until Rose gets her training in him. Then it's an absurd power spike from psychotic training. But it's also a world of absurdity with using healing magic to min-max exercise results by healing away your muscle pain and fatigue. And it's not like Usato stops growing when the training ends. He continuously grows and gets even stronger, developing his own techniques the more he experiences the world. The anime isn't bad by any means. It's got a second season in production. Clearly, it did very well if it got a second season. But it's very far behind both other versions of the story, and here's where the weirdness begins. The manga has what I describe as filler with purpose. Reading both the novel and the manga, I was kind of surprised at the mini arc in the manga about what happened to Rose that caused her to create the rescue squad showing up around chapter 40. It's just a basic mini filler arc. The kind of thing that would be tacked on to the end of a novel as an omake. The manga has such personality put behind the characters, and it's a really great read, but I just enjoy the novel more. I found Kurokata's writing style unintentionally more humorous. There were a lot of points where I found myself audibly laughing while reading the novel, and that's not something that happened with either the manga or anime. And the manga is how I even found the series in the first place. This is one of those rare times in the otaku market where I can say all three versions are good for different reasons. The anime is well crafted, even if the comedy is cut for brevity. The manga is very well crafted, keeping the comedy while tweaking the story and flow for the manga market. And the novel is just the most complete version of the story, and I found it the most entertaining. The base concept is very entertaining in and of itself, an unstoppable monster specializing in pugilism and healing magic, charming the fox girl Amako, Suzune, who really wants that Usato cake, Phelim, the black knight he beats the shit out of, Kiriha, who is a beastfolk friend of Amako, Nea, a half-vampire half-lich who forces a familiar pact onto him, and Eva, the princess of the neighboring kingdom of Samarial. There's also an entire chapter of the novel where Suzune is dodging a prince from an allied nation who likes her by claiming she's in love with Usato, which isn't a complete lie. And it comes back around to the main story when said prince meets Usato. There's also the crazy way Usato breaks people's brains by being a healer and a brawler. It's a really great story. The Ideal Gigilo Life, written by Tsunehiko Watanabe, began publishing as a novel in September 2012, with a manga drawn by Neko Hinotsuki publishing from 2017 and the first season of anime in production. Point of correction in the name. The English serialization titles this series The Ideal Sponger Life, but the word himo does not translate into that. Anyways, the story starts with our main man Zenjiro Yamai having a very nice dream, and then he wakes up. He's got a rare 2 days off from his white-collar monotony. And on his way back from the Konbini with his lunch, he gets zapped into an alternate world, surrounded by guards and greeted by a woman calling him her husband. Time for some basic world building and setup. Her name is Ora Kapua, first reigning queen of the Kapua kingdom. It's a very early society, akin to something like Constantinople before glass was invented. So maybe Bronze Age. It's got hints of Arabian and Mediterranean to it. But Zenjiro isn't fully buying the story until Ora calls over a soldier riding a raptorial dragon, translated as Dash Drake in the official publication. So then the real talk takes place. The Kapua royal family holds unique space-time magic, but why was Zenjiro summoned? Well, 2 reasons. First being that Kapua is culturally a patriarchal monarchy. It's always been kings, and having a queen in charge is causing some friction with the nobility over tradition. Second being Zenjiro has ancestors who are from Kapua that used space-time magic to elope to Earth. Now what Ora needs is a prince consort that won't be a danger to authority as queen, but will still be accepted by the nobility so she won't be forced into a political marriage just to avoid infighting. And while Zenjiro is piecing together her motives, an act of probably calculated humility from Ora combined with the fact that she's drop-dead gorgeous and a literal queen seals the deal for him. Zenjiro goes back to his world to settle his affairs, basically quit his job and sell the stuff he no longer needs, and buy the things he wants. He was given a special rug and told if he places the things he wants to bring with him on it, they can all be transported together. With the catch being that this magic is so difficult and precise that there won't be another chance to move between worlds for 30 plus years. So Zenjiro also visits his relatives one more time, knowing it'll probably be the last time. Then he makes the transfer, and now Zenjiro has to get through the wedding and learn how to conduct himself as royalty in this foreign world, with the 2 biggest early problems being his humble Japanese manners, which aren't befitting a ruler, prince consort he may be, and his complete lack of knowledge on magic, which he will need to learn. This is a very non-standard isekai series because Zenjiro is just a regular guy. There's quite literally nothing special about him other than his space-time magic, which he can only manage to use after lots of practice. Where the charm of this series comes in is the rom-com nature between Zenjiro and Ora. Their dynamic is complicated because Zenjiro is the leader of the family, as is Kapua culture, while Ora is the leader of the country. So the role of who's in charge switches depending on whether they're in public or in private. There's also some ecchi for fan service because the 2 are in a loving relationship. Just because it was a political marriage doesn't mean it's a white one. And Ora quickly becomes infatuated with her husband behind closed doors. The other part of the story is that it doesn't really have your typical fantasy narrative. There are no demons to defeat, there's no beast folk, no elves or dwarves, it's just humans and dragons plus other normal animals. And even then, those dragons could largely be considered kinds of dinosaurs. The story outside of the royal bedroom revolves around politics of ruling a nation, placating the nobility, the military and their movements, diplomacy with Kapua's neighbors, the twin kingdoms of Jibel and Shiroa. Zenjiro even ends up with a second wife from another continent, Freya from the Uppsala kingdom. Their culture is like Vikings, but with better ships. And most of the early politicking is done by Ora, while Zenjiro tries to recreate things from Earth in this new world, like glass. It really comes together as a kind of nation-builder story, at least until Zenjiro is established enough that Ora begins sending him out as a representative of the royal family. The entire purpose of their agreement was for Zenjiro to be a house husband, but there is a part of the story where Zenjiro even admits that when Ora made that deal, he already knew it wasn't going to last. He'd have to do things as part of the royal family. That's just unavoidable. There's also a little problem with one of Zenjiro's ancestors being Kapuan royalty, because the other one was from the Shiroa royalty. That means Zenjiro technically has 2 special bloodline magic affinities, which could cause a major diplomatic problem if his kids also inherit that trait. Because of how wordy and heavy it is, and how it tries to portray mild fantasy with Bronze Age politics, it can be a bit much to read all at once. But the story and world are all very well thought out, with only a few discrepancies. And the characters usually have internal monologues to explain their thought processes, which helps with the narrative building. Moreover, it's rare to have a city builder isekai that is non-RPG and the main character doesn't have some OP production skill. Zenjiro really is just an average Joe, and everything he does is usually within normal limits of his own capabilities, even when he learns enough magic to teleport with the help of a camera. And for that wordy reason, I recommend starting with the manga if you're interested in the story. And the last one I'm going to talk about is The Nectar of Dharani, written by Hiroyuki Yoshino and drawn by Kenetsu Sato. Either of those names might sound familiar to you, as they are also the ones who made Mai Otome and Quasar of Stigmata. So Nectar of Dharani is a manga that started publishing in 2016. It has no novel form and no anime announced yet. And the reason for that is probably because it's just as much erotica as it is isekai. If you're familiar with Quasar, then you probably know what's coming. So the story. The main man is Kai, a guy in his early 20s who's been beaten down by life and presumably dies while working construction. In another world, a man and woman seem to be chased by soldiers in something that looks like it's mid-industrial revolution, but none of the characters appear to be human, though humanoid they are in shape. The woman performs a ritual, while the man holds off the advancing army alone, and this ritual summons Kai to their world. But when the summoner needed a knight, they just got this timid Japanese guy instead. Then it's time for world building. The woman's name is Chakra, and she is the princess of Adarl, the lone survivor after her country was conquered. When the army shows up again, Kai decides to go out with class and defend the woman from an assassin. But he's not allowed to die. The woman changes, her black hair and light horns swapping shades, as this changed woman pulls out her Dharani for Kai. In this world, there are princesses that carry ambrosia in their tits. This ambrosia imbues humans with the God Curse, and this curse is different depending on which ambrosia it is. So when Kai is fed by Chakra, or as she is now, Shakuntala, he becomes the God-cursed Indra, wielding lightning. Kai wakes up the next morning with barely a clue of what happened, only to be told after finding Chakra mid-bath. There is a lot of fan service in this manga. We also get an explanation on the guy. He's from the Lemurian company from the Kingdom of Albion. He was engaged to Chakra's older sister, and his name is Gray Enfield. But this moment of rest won't last. Gray needs to get Chakra and Kai to safety, with the Dahlin military hunting them. This leads to a scene of another assassin being hired and Chakra buying a Celianthrope slave for story reasons. Kai's good nature ends up bringing trouble, taking the assassin right to his target. Gray takes a poisoned arrow and Indra absolutely bodies the assassin. Gray lays dying and Kai promises to become strong so he can protect Chakra in Gray's place. And that's when the Dahlin Empire shows up to capture the princess. Kai is spent from his earlier rampage, and right before he gets bodied, a leopard shows up to pull him out. It's the former slave girl, and she's miffed she couldn't save Chakra too. Now there's a new problem. Chakra has been captured, and Kai is the only one who can save her. So Kai finds the Albion army and steps into his new facade as Gray Enfield, which works because Gray was well known by most, though next to no one actually knows what he looks like. So he plays his role, Gray the Cursed, the Dharani war god, and this is the story of how Kai sucked booba to gain crazy powers. So first thing to talk about, Nectar of Dharani is very naked. The crux of the story being the ambrosia which the antagonist faction is after, stored in the booba of important women. So there's lots to be seen, and there's lots of naked. Though fan service it may be, it's also part of the plot. Most of the time there's actual value in it happening, like when the dwarf princess sneaks into the bath with Kai. Yup, that's a dwarf woman. The ecchi can come off as gratuitous, but what breaks it up is the absolute chunk of a story. This isn't a demon lord invasion story. It's a straight up world war with guns and bombs, and Dala has sarin gas, and there's another isekai character who's an American that got pulled from World War II. The world is rapidly advancing in technology because of the otherworlders that get pulled into it. But also there's those trying to maintain traditions of the old gods with their religions and ambrosia. There's a very finely woven story here. One of my favorite parts is 30 chapters deep. Kai has been through some shit and feels like he's getting the hang of pretending to be a war hero. That's when the Queen of Albion gives Kai a mission to root out the trafficking and distribution of a very dangerous narcotic called mermaid blood within the historic academy of the capital, Avalon. He's getting a tour of the building, and in the training hall he witnesses an upperclassman bully an underclassman. So of course Kai steps in. And the asshole says Kai might as well spar with him as well, which Kai readily agrees to. He picks up a foil but says no to the training equipment, which pisses the asshole off. Then as soon as the match starts, Kai surrenders. This pisses the asshole off even more, which leads to seeing Kai has some nasty scars. Kai even says he got them in battle and the wounds should have killed him. The asshole asks if Kai has actual experience in battle, and Kai's answer really stuck with me. The one thing I've learned is that fighting always comes with a cost. Whether it's the people under your command or the people you're trying to protect, or even yourself. It doesn't matter how good you are. Once the fighting starts, no one comes out of it the same person they were before. So I've learned that if I can stop a fight from happening, even if it means by begging or humiliating myself and act a fool, I'll do it. Pride won't stop a bullet. This is a manga where Kai sucks tits for superpowers, but here he is dropping deep philosophical understanding on the nature of conflict and how it affects the mind and soul of everyone involved. And he does this while on a narco sting op. I didn't like Quasar of Stigmata, but Nectar of Dharani is a completely different beast. There's international politicking during a rapidly escalating war, and Kai himself is just a wimpy Japanese guy. Though he has knowledge of Earth and technology he leans on to create victories where there'd otherwise be defeats. He's still just a guy who can't really do much until there's some ambrosia in his system. And he does get to sample lots of ambrosia. Chakra with Indra, Doranea with Ifrit, Shiera with Oceanus, and Shizuru with Nordri, to name 4 of them. There are more, but for all the gooner bait Dharani is, it's also a military epoch, with the way war and diplomacy plays out between Albion and Dala. And that's why I like it. It has tanks and zeppelins and chemical weapons, tribal conflicts, subterfuge you'd find in a spy thriller. It's brilliantly written, and all of the fan service is just the icing on the cake rather than the cake itself. And good God, there's a lot of cake in this manga. So there you have it. These are my 4 favorite isekai series I've ever read. Each one subverts the expectation of an isekai story in a unique way. Absurdity with logic, a city builder, and a war drama. They don't rely on RPG tropes. The OP main characters don't break the settings they're in, while the ones who are pathetically weak show levels of growth and maturity. They are all unique in a way that I haven't seen any other isekai even come close to, and tell their stories in a way that doesn't slouch on world building, character building, or entertainment value. I am the NBT. This has been the Noble Weeaboo. Like or don't, sub or don't, and thank you for watching. If you haven't given these 4 series a chance, please reconsider. I think they are worth your time and attention.